Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. We always like to take a deep dive into really fascinating topics. And today, we're going to be focusing on hunting and Islamic law.
Very good.
We're going to be looking primarily at Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 3, as our source. And I think this is a really interesting topic because it just kind of shows this really beautiful tapestry of Islamic ethics and how it permeates, even an act like hunting. And
it's fascinating how Islamic law approaches this topic. It goes beyond a simple yes or no about permission or prohibition. And it's really about ensuring that even permissible acts are carried out with a deep sense of responsibility and respect for life.
Yeah, it's like this spiritual dimension to it, too. You get an act that might seem pretty straightforward.
Absolutely. And this awareness of the sacredness of life is palpable right from the start, even in the methods of hunting that are deemed permissible. For instance, Sunan al Tirmidhi explicitly allows hunting with trained dogs. But there's a beautiful detail here. The Prophet Muhammad emphasized the importance of invoking Allah's name before sending the dog out.
Wow. It's like you're acknowledging
that
you're using the animal for your needs, but you're doing it with this awareness.
Yeah, exactly. The divine and a recognition of the life that you're about to take.
Yes.
It's about aligning your actions with the divine will and ensuring that even a necessary act like hunting for sustenance is infused with a sense of reverence and mindfulness. This concept of intentionality is central to Islam.
Yes.
And it's reflected in the Arabic word niyya, which is the intention behind an action. And the purity of intention can actually elevate even mundane actions to a higher spiritual plane.
So even before the hunt begins.
Yeah.
Islamic law kind of sets the stage for...
ethical conduct. By emphasizing this connection between our actions and our relationship with the divine.
Absolutely. And it's really cool how it extends to like the tools and techniques used for hunting.
Yes. So Sunan al Tirmidhi explicitly permits the use of bows and arrows for hunting, which aligns with the prophetic traditions of the time. And there's also a very interesting anecdote in the Hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, when asked about the lack of knives for slaughter, permitted the use of any tool that ensures proper flow of blood for halal consumption.
With a couple of
very specific exceptions. This is where it gets really interesting.
Teeth and nails, right?
Yes. But why those two?
Teeth were deemed unsuitable because they are bone and not a tool meant for cutting. And nails were considered the tools of Ethiopians, possibly reflecting a cultural context or practice that wasn't aligned with the norms of the time.
That's so interesting.
It is fascinating to consider how even these seemingly small details were given consideration in Islamic law.
It's like a window into the historical and social context of the time.
Yes, reminding us that interpretations of religious law aren't static. They evolve and adapt while still upholding the core principles.
I love that. And it's so true because it makes it a living tradition. Precisely. It's a key point to remember. When studying Islamic jurisprudence, it's a living tradition that balances firmly established principles with a dynamic approach to interpretation.
Yes.
This is evident in the various schools of thought within Islamic law, each offering its own perspective on specific matters while remaining rooted in the foundational texts.
Right. So this tiny little detail about teeth and nails opens up like a bigger conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
About Islamic law.
Absolutely.
And it encourages us to delve deeper, to look beyond the surface and consider the historical, cultural, and even social factors that might have influenced specific rulings.
Yes.
It's a reminder that Islamic law isn't just a rigid set of rules, but a dynamic system guided by principles of justice, mercy, and wisdom.
And this sensitivity to context is also apparent in how Islamic law addresses animal welfare. So, for instance, Sunan al Tirmidhi explicitly prohibits
using living creatures as target practice.
It's a crucial point. This prohibition highlights the Islamic emphasis on minimizing harm to animals and recognizing their inherent value.
Yes. It's not about prohibiting hunting altogether, but about setting ethical boundaries that reflect a deep respect for all of God's creation.
It's like saying, you can hunt for sustenance, but you cannot treat animals.
Exactly. As mere objects for your amusement.
Right. And this raises a really important question for us today, especially in light of modern hunting practices. Does this principle imply a distinction between hunting for sustenance, which was a necessity in the time of the Prophet, and hunting for sport, which is more prevalent today?
That's a complex question.
It is a complex question. I think a lot of people grapple with that, especially those who are trying to reconcile their love of hunting with their ethical and religious beliefs.
It is indeed. On the one hand, hunting solely for sport or entertainment, where the animal's life is taken without a clear need for food or protection, could be seen as contradicting this principle of minimizing harm. After all, the primary purpose is no longer about fulfilling a basic need, but deriving pleasure from the act itself.
Right, and from an Islamic perspective, that can raise questions.
Exactly. About intention, especially if it involves causing unnecessary suffering to the animal. Remember niyyah, the concept of niyyah we discussed earlier. The intention behind an action carries significant weight in Islam if the intention is primarily for leisure or personal gratification, and it involves causing harm to an animal without a justifiable need. It could be argued that it goes against the spirit of Islamic teachings on animal welfare.
But on the other hand, some might argue that, even in sport hunting, there are elements of skill, respect for the animal, and even conservation involved. For example, many hunters today actively participate in wildlife management programs and contribute to the preservation of animal populations.
That's a valid point. And there's also the argument that hunting, even for sport, can be a way to connect with nature, learn about wildlife, and appreciate the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Some might even argue that it's a more ethical way to obtain meat than relying on factory farming, which often involves inhumane treatment of animals.
That's a very valid point. This is a multifaceted issue with valid arguments on both sides. It seems like navigating this question requires a deep understanding of Islamic principles, careful consideration of one's own intentions, and a willingness to engage in thoughtful dialogue about the ethics of hunting.
Absolutely, in the modern world.
And what's fascinating is that Sunan al Tirmidhi doesn't just address the act of hunting itself, but also how these principles extend to the realm of business and trade you're referring to. The hadith that prohibits the selling of animals whose milk has been intentionally retained to deceive the buyer.
Yes. This practice, known as muhafala in Arabic, was seen as a form of dishonesty and a violation of the principles of fairness in business dealings.
So even something as seemingly specific as selling an animal is subject to the overarching Islamic principle.
Precisely. Of honesty, transparency, and fair treatment. It highlights the interconnectedness of Islamic ethics, showing how principles of righteousness and compassion extend to all aspects of life, from our interactions with animals to the way we conduct business.
It's like Islamic law is creating a framework for a just and ethical society, where even seemingly mundane transactions are governed by this higher moral code. But I have to admit, there's one hadith that, at first glance, seems completely unrelated to hunting. It's the one about avoiding garlic before going to the mosque.
Ah, that's a fascinating one.
How does that tie into all of this?
While it might seem unrelated on the surface, it speaks to a deeper principle that runs through all of Islamic teachings. The principle of mindfulness and intention in all of our actions.
I'm intrigued. How do you see that connection playing out?
Think about it this way. The prohibition on garlic before prayer is about respecting the sanctity of the mosque and ensuring that one's presence there is focused and free from distractions. It's about being present and intentional in your act of worship.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going.
Now apply that same principle to hunting. If we're called to be mindful and intentional, even in something as simple as avoiding certain foods before prayer, how much more important is it to be mindful and intentional when taking the life of an animal?
That's a powerful connection. It's suggesting that hunting shouldn't be a mindless or impulsive act, but one undertaken with deep consideration, a clear purpose, and a conscious awareness of its impact.
Exactly. The hadith about garlic, in a way, reminds us that even in permissible acts, the intention behind them matters. It encourages us to approach all of our actions, including those related to hunting, with a sense of reverence, responsibility, and a clear understanding of our relationship with both the creator and the creation.
This deep dive is already providing so much food for thought. I'm eager to continue exploring this topic and uncover even more insights.
And speaking of intentionality, let's shift our focus to another aspect of hunting that the hadith addresses. The treatment of game that has been wounded or killed. Remember the hadith we discussed earlier?
Yes.
About using dogs for hunting?
Yes, the one where the Prophet Muhammad allowed eating game caught by trained dogs, even if the dog could kill the animal. It really emphasized the permissibility of using dogs.
Yes, as hunting companions. Right. Now, building on this principle, there's another hadith that offers further guidance on handling game that has been shot with an arrow.
Okay.
This hadith dives into those situations where the animal doesn't die instantly, but runs off and is later found dead.
Oh, so like those situations where you're not sure if your arrow was the cause of death.
Exactly. The Hadith provides clarity on this matter. It states that if you find the animal dead, and it's clear that your arrow was the cause of death, meaning there are no other apparent injuries, then it's permissible to eat the animal.
Interesting. So even if you didn't perform the actual slaughter yourself, but your arrow was the cause of death.
Precisely. But what's really interesting here is the emphasis on seeking knowledge and clarification when faced with uncertainty. If you find the animal and you're unsure whether your arrow was the sole cause of death, the Hadith advises seeking guidance from someone knowledgeable in these matters.
That's really interesting because that reminds me of the broader principle.
It does, of seeking knowledge in Islam. We're not supposed to just blindly follow rules, but to really understand the principles behind them and seek expert advice when needed, especially in matters as sensitive as taking a life.
Exactly. It encourages a sense of responsibility and thoughtful engagement with the teachings. Now, this principle of seeking knowledge extends beyond the immediate act of hunting. It encompasses the broader impact of our actions on the environment and the well-being of other creatures.
Were you talking about the Hadith that addresses the situation?
Of animals fleeing and becoming wild. Precisely. This Hadith delves into a specific scenario, whether it's permissible to shoot camels, cows, or sheep that have escaped and become wild. And the ruling, in this case, is that they can be hunted and consumed, even if they're not, typically designated as game animals.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. Because they could be a threat.
That's a valid interpretation.
Yeah.
To crops, to other animals, or even people.
Right. But there's another layer to this Hadith, a deeper implication that connects to that. The concept of stewardship and our responsibility for the well-being of domesticated animals. If we allow our livestock to escape and become wild, we're essentially neglecting our duty to care for them.
And that could also have an impact on the ecosystem as well.
Exactly. Introducing formerly domesticated animals into a wild environment where they might not belong could have unintended consequences for the existing flora and fauna.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. Islamic teachings often connect seemingly individual choices to their broader societal and environmental consequences, encouraging us to think beyond our immediate needs and consider the impact of our actions on the world around us.
It's like reminding us that we are caretakers of the earth, not just consumers of it.
Exactly. And speaking of, this interconnectedness, this really brings to light how Islamic teachings aren't just a set of isolated rules, but a holistic ethical framework that guides our interactions with the natural world, the animals we depend on, and even the way we conduct business.
Yeah. And speaking of business, let's bring our conversation back to...
Absolutely. That fascinating intersection between hunting practices and economic ethics we've already discussed. The prohibition on muhafala, the deceptive practice of selling animals while misrepresenting their milk production. But there's another hadith that tackles a different form of dishonesty in business, one that centers around oaths and truthfulness.
You're talking about the hadith that warns against...
Yes, making false oaths to promote merchandise. That's the one. This hadith places a strong emphasis on honesty and integrity. In business transactions, it condemns the practice of swearing falsely about the quality or value of goods to induce a sale.
It seems like it's a response to that human tendency to exaggerate or embellish.
Exactly,
for
to
personal
gain, especially when profit is involved.
Yeah. And it's fascinating how Islam, even centuries ago, recognized and addressed these ethical dilemmas.
They're still so relevant in today's marketplace.
And there's some pretty serious consequences in this hadith.
There are, if you engage in this type of behavior. It states that those who make false oaths to promote their merchandise will be raised on the day of judgment amongst the wicked and will face a painful punishment.
Wow. So it's not just a social or ethical transgression. It's a spiritual one as well.
Absolutely. This highlights that ethical conduct isn't just about earthly consequences, but also has profound implications for our spiritual well-being. It underscores the Islamic belief that our actions in this life have consequences in the hereafter.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful incentive to act with integrity. To know that.
It is. Your deeds are being accounted for and will ultimately be judged.
But it's not just about the seller's responsibility. There are also hadiths that protect the rights of the buyer, ensuring that they're not being taken advantage of.
You're absolutely right. Fairness is a two-way street. One of the key principles that upholds this balance is the concept of khiyar, which translates to option or choice. These hadiths establish the principle that both the buyer and seller have the right to reconsider a sale as long as they haven't physically separated or explicitly agreed to finalize the deal.
So it's like a built-in grace period.
Exactly, to prevent buyer's remorse or situations where one party feels pressured or coerced into a transaction they're not entirely comfortable with.
It promotes transparency and mutual consent.
Exactly. In business dealings, recognizing that genuine fairness requires protecting the interests of both parties involved.
This deep dive into Islamic law is really illuminating the nuanced and multifaceted ways in which these teachings address ethical conduct across the board. It's fascinating how it encompasses not just the act of hunting itself, but also the treatment of animals,
It's a principle
of fair trade, and even the broader social and environmental impact of our choices.
What's truly remarkable is how these teachings, deeply rooted in centuries-old wisdom, continue to offer valuable guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life as we face increasingly complex ethical dilemmas related to food production, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. The principles we've explored today can serve as a compass, guiding us towards choices that are both just and compassionate.
And it's amazing how these teachings go beyond just like a canon, outlining what's permissible or forbidden. They actually encourage positive actions.
Right, that contribute to a just and equitable society. I'm thinking, for instance, about the Hadith that addresses wealthy individuals delaying the repayment of debts.
Yes, that's a great example.
It speaks to the heart of social responsibility. The Hadith condemns delaying repayment as a form of oppression, highlighting the responsibility of those with financial means to be considerate of others' needs and fulfill their obligations promptly.
It's so relevant in a world.
Absolutely. Where economic disparities are so prevalent, it underscores that. Economic power should be wielded ethically, not as a tool to exploit or disregard the well-being of others. Wealth, in the Islamic perspective, comes with an inherent obligation to use it justly and avoid causing hardship to those less fortunate.
Right. And this really resonates with the concept of zakat, one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
Exactly, where Muslims are obligated to give a portion of their wealth to charity. It's a built-in mechanism for wealth redistribution and social welfare.
And this sense of responsibility extends beyond financial dealings to a broader concern for the community and the environment. I'm thinking about like the Hadiths that address hoarding.
Right, especially in times of scarcity or crisis.
These teachings seem so relevant today with this growing awareness.
They do, of resource scarcity and the potential for exploitation. During times of crisis, these hadiths strongly condemn hoarding essential goods, especially when it leads to price gouging or deprives others of access to necessities. They emphasize sharing resources and ensuring everyone has access to basic sustenance, particularly in challenging times.
That's like a reminder that we're not isolated individuals, but part of a larger interconnected web.
Right. Our actions have these ripple effects. And in a society where everyone is interdependent, our choices can either contribute to collective well-being or exacerbate existing inequalities. This concept of social solidarity is beautifully articulated in a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and their mutual kindness, mercy and compassion are like one body. When any limb aches, the whole body reacts with sleeplessness and fever.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful analogy. It really emphasizes the importance of...
It does. Empathy and shared responsibility. It encourages us to view ourselves, not just as individuals pursuing our own interests, but as members of a community where our actions impact others and where we have a collective responsibility to ensure the well-being of all.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. It's so clear that Islamic teachings offer this comprehensive framework for ethical conduct that extends far beyond the act of hunting. It encompasses the treatment of animals, the principles of fair trade, and even the broader social and environmental impact of our choices.
It's remarkable how these teachings, rooted in centuries-old wisdom, continue to offer valuable guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life as we face increasing ethical dilemmas related to food production, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. These principles we've explored today can serve as a compass, guiding us towards choices that are both just and compassionate.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what key takeaway would you leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway is that Islamic teachings on hunting are about so much more than just the physical act. You know, they're about cultivating a deep respect for life, recognizing our interconnectedness with all of creation, and striving to live in a way that upholds justice, compassion, and balance.
That is beautifully said. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly enriching journey through the world of Islamic law and hunting. Until next time, may your pursuit of knowledge be filled with Ihsan.